Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Karita Harrell. I'm Associate Director for Student and Academic Services here at ASU in the School of Human Evolution and Social Change. Thank you so much for joining us for this presentation that also is co-sponsored with ASU Career Services. So just want to highlight Cadence and Nyasha and their support for career services and sponsoring this event, and already in advance thank our distinguished panelists for taking their time out to share their knowledge and their experiences, especially as ASU alumni with our students here. And thank you to all of our students for being here for the presentation. So each of our panelists will have an opportunity to share. You're welcome to put questions in the chat, and then there also will be time at the end of the session and you can even unmute and share your questions with our panelists. And so I'll briefly just mention our panelists, and then they'll share a little bit more about who they are. So we have Christine Clark, and she is museum curator at the Chandler Museum. We have Jenna Green. She's a co-curator at TMC Healing Art Program. We have Jennifer McGabe, and she's director and chief curator at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art. So again, we thank you so much for taking your time to share with our students here. And so I'll go ahead, and I believe Christine is our first presenter.
Okay, hello. So as mentioned, my name is Christine Clark, and I graduated from SHESC in 2019. So here we are 5 years later, and I'm this 5-year work anniversary, just recently promoted to museum curator here at the Chandler Museum. So success story for ASU and SHESC. I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see. Okay, so a little bit about me is, I was a non-traditional student. So I'm coming at museums from my second career. I first studied English education. Shout out to the English major I hear we have in the audience. So I spent 10 years as a high school language arts teacher. And then for various reasons, just decided to pivot and then went to ASU to get my master's in museum studies. So career changer again. And over the course of my time at ASU, had various student jobs, like at the ASU Art Museum, internships across different institutions in the Valley, all of which I super highly encourage, even if you just don't even know what it is that you want to do yet, but just to take advantage of those opportunities and get those little tastes of oh, this is what it is to be in collections. This is what it is, what it's like to be, doing install. Just every little piece of experience helps, define what it is that you want to do. So again, it took me about 5 years post-grad to get to, where I am now. And I'm just gonna kind of be totally honest, because I know you guys are students right now and kind of curious about the journey and how you go from student to a real museum professional. And for the first 3 of the 5 years, I was juggling part-time jobs. So for the first 3 years post-grad, I was at the Chandler Museum part-time. I started off as an educator, shocker, and they saw that I was coming from an education background. So facilitating field trips, planning curriculum for different programs that the museum does, starting on that tail end. And then also, slowly thinking about the types of interactives that exhibits, include to engage the community. I think education was a very seamless transition for me in that way. So I started off as an educator at the Chandler Museum, but meanwhile, or simultaneously, I was also, I had a side hustle doing seasonal install work at SMOCA, actually, where Jennifer is, and also then facilitating field trips at SMOCA. So I think it's very common to, kind of like living that like gig economy, the gig life, the side hustles, like putting together quite a few different part-time jobs while you're waiting for like one job, hopefully to like evolve into a full-time position. So kind of like, so little poster child for patience pays off. So yeah, and then just again, want to be totally transparent on this panel because I know kind of in your shoes. So it is now 5 years post grad that I feel that I'm finally making more than I was back when I was a teacher and started on this journey. So just kind of wanted to put that out there. So I came from an education background. Obviously, I feel like that's a very common entry point for different institutions. But I know people who have entered museums from all walks of life. I feel like again, starting off, even if it's just kind of that part-time on call, like, you'll have a sporadic amount of hours whenever we have a field trip coming to the gallery, or front desk coverage, on the weekends and all of those things. I know sometimes it's like you want to graduate and have a full-time job, and that's not always the case, but all of these opportunities are so informative. And again, I know our current our visitor services guru, who also like runs our museum store and is in charge of our like rentals program. I mean, she went to cosmetology school, but so sometimes it's just like literally, I know people from all different kinds of backgrounds who have gotten their foot into museums and, learned a lot on the job. So I really think that that's where those student jobs and internships and getting like that foot in the door is like really important. So right now, so I'm just fresh. I've not even been a month in my current position before, most recently before getting upgraded to curator. By title, I was the community engagement specialist. So again, just working with different stakeholders, but that meant all kinds of things. And our institution is kind of small. So we did all kinds of things. Like on the left, that's kind of a behind the scenes for like trying to get like a good photo for the gram. I'm sure you guys know what that's like. And sometimes it looks like silly shenanigans to end up with like a good shot. But I guess another thing that I think is really, that at least for me personally, has benefited about kind of working small and across different departments of museum life is that I just think that then it helps you build a more holistic view and understanding of what it takes to be successful in whatever position you end up in. So for example, there were, some student jobs, I was in collections or, doing install, and those things go hand in hand because then you know how carefully you need to handle the objects. So for example, if I'm trying to take a photo and I'm using an object of the collection, this was not a collection object, but you have an understanding when a different department has an ask, like, oh, we want to do this crazy thing for Instagram for a reel. And maybe it sounds really cool, but like, wait a minute. We can't really be taking this outside. We can't expose this, to this type of light. Or yeah, we can do it because we're going to be doing it safely with X, Y, and Z precautions. I also think that having these different positions and having these different roles as I was like waiting and my position was evolving, meant that I was working with different people, and getting to know different people on the team. And in terms of like communication and relationship building, I think that only then helps. When later it's like, oh, okay, surprise, or like, hey, good news, this week, I'm actually now your supervisor. And there's no animosity there, or there's no like, wait, where are you coming from? It's like, oh yeah, this is so great. I've worked with you for these years. Yeah, in a different capacity. I'm happy for you. I think it's just good to get to know all the different people that make up the team wherever you are. Because you never know when people shift, where people will land, where you will land, and how things will just kind of get renegotiated. I do also want to say that I think, especially coming off of like the WMA conference in Tucson, I do think that you can be a lowercase L leader. You don't have to be a capital L leader in your institution to make a difference. We have had interns and we have had different people who like just came in with a fresh perspective and really contributed something special to the team. So keep that in mind as well. Let me see what else. Okay, so I'll leave this on. So in my current position, I kind of work alongside the leadership team to schedule, coordinate our exhibits, plan how to bring them to life for our visitors. So I might, work in conjunction with the collections person and then there might be someone else who is drafting the narrative of the exhibit. But then when we're talking about the physical layout of it, what does that look like? And from the visitor's point of view, how will they like experience, the story that we're trying to tell? Installs and layouts can sound really glamorous, but it's also a lot of coordinating by email and nagging people to do something that they promised you that they would do by a certain deadline. When it comes to communication, one thing that I try to do is never ask someone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. So, for example, let's say we're working there's an event at night and there's some issue with the valet parking or the trash needs to be taken out. Like, I'm not above emptying a trash bag and taking it to where the dumpster is. So if I'm asking somebody else to do it, it's not because I think it's beneath me. It's just sometimes everybody needs to pitch in to do what is needed, to get the job done. I do think it's important to be clear and to be kind when communicating. I think those are the kind of big things that can be like deal breakers. And unfortunately, sometimes people, can hold grudges when there's a bad communication experience. And then later on, you might need a favor from them and it's not professional. I don't, agree with it, but there might be someone who may very professionally, but passive aggressively underneath kind of not go out of their way to help you because of a previous, rough patch. I think it's also helpful if you get yourself into a place, where you can kind of figure this out, is like different people's communication styles. For example, we have like we have someone who only works, part-time, limited hours, helping at the front desk. And she maybe is not inside some of these like internal decision-making kind of conversations. So then when it trickles down to the front desk and it's like, okay, like we're doing this. And she's always like, well, what if we did it this way? And why don't we do it that way instead? Like, I can't understand the reasoning behind this like decree that I feel like is just coming from above. And sometimes that rubs people the wrong way, but we've already made this decision. You weren't a part of those decisions, but trust us that like we thought about it carefully. However, I really think she's just the type of person that she just wants to know why. So maybe instead of just saying, this is the way we're doing it, it's just, hey, you know what? Because of this is why we're doing it. And that solves like any communication drama or like potential, conflict between, in this case, like the front desk and potentially like the exhibits team. There's lots of things that are rewarding and challenging. One of the things that I love about museum work is that literally every day is different. There's lots of problem solving, which I really like. I feel like every day there's like a new thing. We kind of have to like MacGyver or like figure out how we're gonna, pull it off. Although a challenge also is, I know this is like a super old reference. I don't know how many people like watch I Love Lucy anymore, but when I was thinking about challenges, I was thinking about that episode with the chocolate bonbons going down the conveyor belt, and it's just like the demands, they're piling up, and I can't necessarily like always keep up with them, and she starts stuffing them down her shirt and in her mouth just to like disguise her, ineffectiveness. Um, and so that can be a challenge, dealing with like lots of projects and people and schedules. That's something that I hope to kind of like, as I get my feet a little bit more in this role and I can have a voice in some of the scheduling, I'm hoping to like kind of make that feel a little bit more doable. I think another challenge is we fall under the city. Not that this is like a challenge that no one else, faces, but I think that one challenge is when you have to like deal with external factors or people or decisions that affect your work. And it's just like, okay, like my back is against the wall. We have to do this thing. I don't want to do this thing. Nobody actually wants to do this thing. But for example, like, oh, the mayor wants it, so we got to do it. However, I think that sometimes like limitations, whether it's like a budget limitation or a creative restraint, can also like foster creativity, because instead of just like anything can happen, when you have these like limits and this framework, you're like, okay, well, it's kind of sad that this is off the table, but now from what is on the table, what can we do? So I think that that's exciting. Another thing that I really love doing now is, and this is this picture on the right, is kind of paying it forward and seeing like the new like up and comers and giving them like the kudos that they deserve. So for example, on the right hand side, I'll give a little shout out. We just opened this exhibit titled Marvelocity. For those of you who are into like the Marvel DC universe and maybe know Alex Ross, I didn't know who he was before before putting up this exhibit. It's a traveling show, and it highlights like the artistry of this illustrator, and it actually kind of includes some childhood drawings of his, which I think are really special. But we had this intern pictured in the black shirt kind of in the corner, and he's actually been studying animation, and he studied this type of art, so he kind of turned one wall of the gallery into this like comic book illustration style with vinyl, and he just was an immense help during layout, because instead of just aesthetically like, oh, like I think that these two prints would look good next to each other, he was like, oh no, you can't do that, because like this one is an X-Men and this one is an Avenger, or I don't know. I'm not an expert in the Marvel universe, but he was. So like curatorially, he was able to help like arrange prints and stories in like ways that made sense for the characters, but also aesthetically. So I think, seeing again, like current students and like what they're learning and how it can apply and like benefit the institution. And he's also, of course, like many people in the museum world, also an artist. So I just think it's so cool when it's like, yeah, like I don't need to be in charge of this. Like, please feel free, like help with the layout and let your voice like help the exhibit evolve into like the best version it can be, okay. Hey, so in terms of some nuggets of advice, number one is like, as long as you're at ASU, take advantage of as many opportunities as you can, okay? Milk the student rate, going to conferences, like you hear about an internship, go for it. I mean, don't overburden yourself if you really can't, like, you've got a full course load and you can't handle, X, Y, or Z. But seriously, like, just take advantage. Like, I feel like being at ASU, there's just so many resources at your disposal that just don't exist in the real world. I want to share one anecdote, and I also want to acknowledge, and I'm so sad, beware to introverts. Because I feel like I'm one of those like ambiverts, like I can put on the show like for work, but really I would rather be at home with a book. So I hate when people are like, you got to put yourself out there and network. And I think you can find hopefully like a balance that works for you. So you can feel authentic and not like weird and fake. And like, force networky. But I want to share a story because it's like, you just never know who you're going to meet. So for example, one of the things that I did near the end of my master's program was I did a summer internship at Teotihuacan in the Teo lab. And so this was going to be the summer, I forgot what year. Okay, let's just say it was 2018. But I knew I was going in the summer. And right before the summer there was a museum conference here in town. AAM, the American Alliance of Museums, had their conference here in Phoenix. So it was cool because it was like no travel, blah, blah, blah. And of course I was a student. I don't think I could afford to go to the whole entire, I couldn't pay to go to the entire conference, but lots of times conferences will do a thing where they're like, if you volunteer for a shift, you get like a day free. So I'm at the conference and I'm just in the like volunteer room where just as a little thank you for the volunteers, they're like, have a granola bar, have a cup of coffee, like mingle with the other volunteers while you're waiting for your assignment and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm there. And again, I'm introvert. I'm like, I don't really want to talk to any of these randos. Like, I'm just here to get that free day at the conference. But I strike up into conversation with this woman and we're just making chit chat, literally like over a granola bar. And it just comes out that like, oh yeah, I'm so excited because in the summer, in like just a month, I guess after that, I was going to go to Mexico and I was going to do this super cool internship, working with archaeologists. And I'm just like super excited about spending a month there. And she was like, oh, I'm writing a book about objects, about objects. That's oversimplifying it. She was writing a book about how to do collections inventory and basically a book about what I was going to be doing in Mexico. And she was like, I want it to be international in scope and I already have contributors from X, Y, and Z countries. I would really love it if at the end of your internship, you contributed like a case study to be like a chapter in the book. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And, the publishing process took a while and it took years and lots of edits and everything. But I mean, based off of that totally random interaction I had at a conference, I ended up meeting this person. She was super nice. It gave me a focus during the internship because then I walked into the internship knowing I am going to write specifically in this way about this work and this experience, and got published. I mean, my name's not on the cover of the book, but that's a big deal. And all of that just because I was willing to be friendly with somebody who's making chit chat with me at a conference. You just never know and I feel like the museum world is like filled with all of those little types of anecdotes. Like everybody's just super nice. I mean, we're all kind of in it together. And then to get kind of like more focused than that, I feel like the industry here is very small and people move, and it's just good to stay like on good terms with the different people that you come across on your path here. So like, for example, let's say, oh, I used to do install at SMOCA and I worked under Laura Spalding Best. Laura Spalding Best isn't at SMOCA anymore. She's at the Desert Botanical Garden now. But for example, if I needed something, or if I was curious about leaving my current job and considering going to Desert Botanical Garden, I could call up Laura, And I've had an intern here and I loved her and I wish we could hire her, but whatever, the budget, positions, it just wasn't in the cards. So I was like, let me do the next best thing for you and try to see if I can get you hired on the install team at SMOCA. Like people here, it's like a lot of people across museums know each other. And so even if, you know, I can't help you with that. I know I know a museum friend in a different institution who may be able to help. I mean, whether it's borrowing a mount for some weird object that you need to put up in an install, or a person that you really love and really think like, hey, we need to keep this talented person in the valley. Like, let's please somebody hire them. Like, there are just so many layers of interconnectedness across the museums that, again, I just think it goes back to, yeah, always, you know, and I don't want to say it in a scary way that like, don't treat every day like it's your interview, you know, but always just like be yourself, but like put your best face forward. And yeah, I just think it pays, it'll come back to you eventually. I feel I've seen it happen. So that's the good energy that I gotta put out there for you. And then just one more little piece is like, don't be too proud. Like, I think you graduate and you're like, I got my master's now, woo! But then you're looking at stuff and it's all entry level. And the thing is, you are entering a new field. So it can feel really humbling and it can feel really discouraging. And again, because non-traditional students, is like, I was in my 30s and I was like, I don't have employment that's giving me healthcare. I'm juggling 2 different jobs. Like, I was very thankful that it's like I have a partner who I could rely on for some of those like health benefits and stuff, while I was like praying for like the one job to like evolve into like a benefits position. But truly, like, every opportunity, no matter how small, again, you never know who you're gonna meet and the skills that you're gonna learn that are just gonna help you in the long run. So I wish everybody the best. I love museums. You can email me any questions. And again, I'm local. I don't think I hit that hard enough, but whatever, that I'm just in Chandler. And I actually live in Phoenix and make the commute every day. So yeah, would love to follow up with anybody who wants to give anybody a private tour or anything like that. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We have our next presenter here. I don't think I introduced Kaiten, so I guess quickly while we're shifting over to Jenna, did you want to add anything, Cadence?
Sure, just briefly, I'll just jump in and say hello, everybody. My name is Cadence Lake. I'm a senior program coordinator with ASU Career Services. So I'm just here today to support the panel and anything that's needed, kind of monitoring the chat as you guys start having questions, you can put them in there. But yeah, nice to meet you all a little bit and excited to sit in on this panel. Thank you.
Okay.
My turn. I'm gonna do the wait. Oh well, that'll be fine. Okay, I'm gonna do it that way. Tech. Okay. So, hi everybody. My name is Jenna, and I am there. Can you all, does that look a little bit better? Okay, great, awesome. Oh, I'm like reeling over what was just spoken by Christine. So much of it resonated with me. Taking it in, breathing. Okay, so my name is Jenna. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Phoenix, but I currently live in Tucson. I wear a lot of hats. I'm a museum educator, arts and health researcher, and a contemplative artist and scholar. So around the field of mindfulness and other types of embodied kind of experiences. I am really interested in working at the intersections of art, education, and well-being. So my focus is really interested in supporting the care work of museums and also humanizing hospital spaces through art and those kind of like mindfulness types of practices. my education background, so I went to ASU and graduated in 2016. I studied anthropology, but took classes both like medical anthropology as well as global health. So I was really interested in this kind of non-clinical and cultural way that cultures past and present view and practice health and well-being. And then I actually left the state of Arizona and went to Seattle for the University of Washington, where I got my master's in museum studies as well as certificate in evaluation. So having this like research component, which I think is so valuable, both in the museum field, but also in academia, if you are interested in going in that realm. And then I'm currently, while I'm in Tucson at the University of Arizona, working on my PhD in art and visual culture education. And I'm hoping to graduate in 2026. We'll actually see when I finish my dissertation. But again, the focus on like care and museums and other kinds of community art spaces that we can engage people with art and culture. I also just wanted to give a little shout out to honing in some other ways that you continue learning outside of universities. So I have a passion in yoga and mindfulness, and so I've gone to different kinds of nonprofits and organizations to like develop those skills, which I think could be really helpful in the museum field that really encourages, as like Kristen was saying, this kind of like interdisciplinary work. I would encourage if you have passions outside of, museums and academia to like go after those and then see in what ways you can integrate them into your work in whatever kind of capacity you're at a museum. So also resonating a lot with what was just spoken, I have had so many different museum jobs, especially throughout Phoenix and the greater Phoenix area. So the bottom left, right after undergrad, I worked at the Phoenix Art Museum as a gallery attendant, like a security guard, which I always think is funny because like who would take me seriously as a security guard? But anyways, I just like told people not to touch the art. But it was a very valuable experience. And I also worked at the Musical Instrument Museum as a guest service representative. Another shout out to SMOCA, that bottom left corner. My first like museum internship was as an exhibitions and registration intern. So I was juggling all three of those positions at one time, which was exhausting, but really important. And I also just really love the point spoken before about like trying different realms within the museum to see like one, just how they work to get an appreciation for what others are doing in your institution, but also it like is very formative for figuring out what you're interested in and what you like to do. And so, for example, like I don't necessarily see myself going back to being a gallery attendant or working in registration specifically, but it was like really helpful to have those skills. Also on the right-hand side within the collections and registration realm, when I was at the University of Washington, a really critical part of that program, and I'm not sure if that's how it is at ASU, but if it's not, I recommend is to have internships and to gain experiences and also the relationships. And so that's a key component of my background or just experience has been like those relationships that you make are so important and just, yeah, kind of echoing what y'all just heard from our last lovely presenter. But anyways, so on the right, that's the Burke Museum of Natural History. And they changed the name, the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture. There we go. So it also can be really helpful for like, I know in the room here, there's anthropologists and maybe art people and from all different kind of disciplines that these skills transfer to different types of museums and organizations. So not, like right here, there's an art museum and a natural history museum. So there's lots of opportunities. Also, speaking of those, I have some experience in curation. On the bottom left there is at the University of Arizona. There's a Center for Creative Photography, as well as in the upper right, the Gage Academy of Art. And so kind of expanding on the different environments in which you can work in after studying museum studies is that it can be at a museum, but it can also be at like Gage is an art academy, but they also have galleries and they have different like exhibits and programs. I also would recommend there's a lot going on in this slide, but like the bottom left, the Glass Art Society, I spent 2 years working there doing programs, most of which focus on like an annual conference every year. So there's so many different directions that you can go with a museum studies degree. Also in the realm of like education and public programs, if anyone's interested, there's so much you can do in that realm. So like moving from left to right, the Bellevue Arts Museum, which sadly closed down this last year in Bellevue, Washington, but you can do like public programs. In the middle is the Museum of Flight outside of Seattle, where did a whole bunch of curriculum development for summer camps and working with like K-12 audiences. And then similar, the Seattle Art Museum on the right-hand side, they have a whole beautiful breadth of different types of programs to engage communities with. And then I did want to do a quick shout out to that bottom photograph. Right before I moved to Tucson, I was actually working at the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, Taliesin West, which is a historic site. If y'all haven't been there, it's beautiful. I highly recommend going at some point. But I was their senior museum educator, so working with homeschool programs, field trips of like K-12 schools, elementary and middle school. We also did like winter break camps and spring camps. So there's like a whole range in which you could use collections, whether they're historic or arts and culture, to like engage people. So that's where my passion comes in, is like the engagement part. And so currently I am the co-curator of the Healing Art Program at the Tucson Medical Center, and I'll share a little bit more specifics about what I do in that role. I'm also, the photo here, that's me on the far right-hand side, working in the Learning and Community Practices Department at the Center for Creative Photography. So I work with different university students, specifically engaging them with whatever current exhibitions we have on view. And then I also wear the hat within academia as an editorial assistant for the Journal of Social Theory and Art Education. And so if you all or any of you are interested in that kind of like academic side of like writing and publishing, I recommend exploring that as an option. The Journal of Museum Education has been a really great resource for me. And they have a lot of like free, also something that was spoken of, like use those student memberships, and like the student discounts make such a huge difference. So highly recommend exploring what is available in like whatever resources you have. So then the Tucson Medical Center, the Healing Art Program, we just hit our 10-year anniversary, and I have been in this role for about 2 months now. It's at a really interesting slow transition period where right now it's framed as a contract position, but coming next year, it'll be enveloped into the foundation of the hospital, which is a community hospital, as like an actual employed position. So it's very interesting and exciting. And at least this is what I'm doing now. That might change come next year, but a major responsibility of mine is managing and expanding our fine art collection. We have over 2,200 objects in that collection, mostly paintings, but fine photography as well, a lot of which are from local Tucsonian or Arizonan artists. I also work with our various professional installers to coordinate installations. And this primarily happens at the hospital, both in like the waiting rooms, the lobby, and the hallways, but also in doctors' offices or in like admin spaces. And then recently, I'll show some pictures. We did a couple off-campus clinics, one of which was called TMC One Bridges. Yeah, I'll show you that in a second. Another part of my job is managing our database. So all of the artwork that we have, our program is completely donor funded. And to manage all of those donated artworks, we use a database called Artwork Archive. And I also work, another branch of this program is we have a cohort about 6 or so musicians that will come to the hospital and either play in the lobbies and waiting areas, or by referral or request, if a patient would like to hear some, beautiful acoustic guitar, we make that happen. So in part of that, there's the like leadership and communication of making sure, I'm responsible for getting everybody's invoices sent to the right department. and making sure that everybody is onboarded correctly and has the right, forms and things to get set up in order to work in the hospital. That's like a very unique kind of space to be working in. And then we do all other kinds of things, such as we have a newsletter that comes out twice a year. We're working on one for this fall, so like stay tuned for that. And we'll do like public speaking events, talking about the healing potential of art, as well as tours in the hospital itself. So sharing the TMC one, The Bridges, I think it's so funny every time, The Bridges. But it's one of the off-campus clinics, and here's some work. So the middle left with the like yellow flowers in the center, that is an artwork that was installed in a patient's room. And then on the right-hand side, we have a couple beautiful landscapes that are in the waiting room. And so a big part of a lot of our collection does kind of center, or at least right now, offers a lot of landscapes and nature, as research has shown, like actual, the clinical research that, or empirical research, that landscapes and nature does boost well-being and can even shorten hospital stays. So a little bit tidbit there.
One of the most common questions I get, how do you get the mannequin to match the measurements of the person? I revealed.
I don't know who that is. Sorry. Almost done. So some rewards, challenges, and advice. I am a big proponent of interdisciplinary work. I myself, in my role, try to bring in different perspectives, as well as really enjoy working with people from different fields, whether they're, classical musicians or nurses and doctors, or in like a museum space that could be people in anthropology, etc. And I also just really want to emphasize that the relationship part is really key in working in these different institutions, because I think museums as a field, we've really started to shift to be more people-centered and more human-centered. And that really starts with how you present yourself and how you behave and how you're considerate and caring towards both yourself as well as the others that you work with. Because oftentimes, and a lot of the like different internships I've had, is it's a very small staff with very limited resources. And so it's about offering what you can when you can, and kind of this reciprocity, which can be really difficult, but really rewarding. Speaking of difficult and rewarding, rest and boundaries I have found to be really crucial. I think there's this big narrative in the museum field around like, we're here because we're passionate about the work. And yes, that is so important, but also that isn't something that can be nor should be weaponized in a way, or that is positioned to negate taking care of yourself and making sure that you have what you need in order to survive, whether that is then advocating, like taking rest so that you can advocate for more salary transparency, or, talking about that kind of realm within museums, which can be also really difficult. And the boundaries piece, I just wanted to note that being passionate about the work, you can often find yourself working really long hours, especially in the education sphere that I mostly have centered my work on. Programs will be offered late into the evenings or on the weekends, and kind of acknowledging that will happen, but then also like not answering emails past a certain time, or just being really intentional about like when you leave the office of like not bringing your work home with you, that phrase. And then also experience is really important, as I kind of mentioned earlier, getting a breadth of whether it's the different types of institutions that you go to, or within like different departments. I think having a holistic view of the museum is really great to have. And to start where and when you can, kind of echoing also what Christine had said earlier. Not really. Yeah, so like if and that is really just to acknowledge like there is a certain privilege that can happen if you are in a position where you're able to take an unpaid internship, but not everybody has that positionality or that, opportunity to take that. So I think it's kind of balancing doing some type of volunteer work could be really great. And I also will mention, I didn't put it in here, but there are various like organizations that you could volunteer for, one of which is the National Emerging Museum Professionals Network. They have a bunch of really great opportunities for committees you can join and like get to know people across the whole country. And so there's certain ways in which you can kind of, for yourself and your own circumstances, kind of negotiate like your time and your resources and what you can offer without pay, basically. And yeah, I can go on for that, but I don't want to round out there to make sure we have time for questions and things. I'm always happy to connect, especially over like yummy pastries or coffee. If you're ever in the Tucson area, I also come up to Phoenix all the time because my family's still there. Or if you'd prefer a non like in-person, kind of connection, you can email me or we connect through socials or other areas. But I think the museum, just to kind of close out, the museum arts and culture sector is such a beautiful space to work in. A lot of the people are really kind and willing to offer you their experience and advice. And also to encourage you to think what other kinds of spaces you can work in besides a museum specifically with that knowledge. So whether that's a conference organization or like for me, a hospital, which I never thought I would work in a hospital. But yeah, so thank you all so much. I'll hand it off from there.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenna. Wonderful information. So I know that, well, we have another presentation and then we'll have some time for questions. So I'm going to shift to Jennifer. So then if you need to, you should be able to share your screen.
Sadly, I didn't prepare a presentation to share my screen, so you have to just look at my face. But I wanted to start by saying thank you to Karita for the invitation to participate and Cadence and Career Services for organizing. Congratulations to Christine. It was so fun to hear your presentation. And both you and Jenna spoke so well about your experiences, and they're very I think I will say very similar things. And hopefully if nothing else, it will just reinforce some of that great information that they already shared. I took an AP art history class in high school and really fell in love with art and culture. I thought that I didn't like history because history was about government, politics, who won what war. And when I took art history, I realized, oh, I love history. It's just I'm interested in the cultural sector. I got to travel to Italy and France, and that just sparked a love of art that's lasted my whole life. So I did a Bachelor of Fine Arts in photography at ASU almost 30 years ago. And then I didn't do much in the world of museums for many years. I'm a very late bloomer. So I took my time traveling and waiting tables and moving around. And when I finally decided to get serious about a career, I knew that it was going to be something related to art, but that being an artist wasn't quite for me. And I started to look at what jobs I wanted, and I was really drawn to work in museums. So looking at those job posts, I looked at what they were looking for and realized straight away that I needed to get my master's degree. But I think it's a really nice to kind of like an idea to reverse engineer where you want to be and figure out what you need to do in order to get there. Similarly, I made a list early on of kind of 5 career trajectories that I could see myself on. And recently found that list and realized, oh, I need to update that because I hit all of them. Right. So sometimes it's just a matter of figuring out where you want to be and how you want to get there. After my master's in art history from San Francisco State University, I took an internship, and it was a summer internship at New Langton Arts, which was a multidisciplinary arts organization that worked really closely with artists. I loved it. I took another internship at a commercial gallery, didn't love it, knew that wasn't where I wanted to be. And it took about a year for that organization to give me a call back and say they had an opening and would I be interested in applying. And so that's really how I got my into art world. And similarly to what Christine and Jenna were saying, it's just, it may not be what you want to do at the moment, but you do your absolute best. You show up, you be professional, you do the best job that you can at whatever task it is. Don't be afraid to, yes, clean the toilet, sweep the floor, all of those things along the way. Be a collaborative team partner, and opportunities will come your way if you're putting yourself out there and putting your best face forward. After after working at New Langton Arts, and really that it's an experience that has stayed with me because I consider my curatorial practice to be artist centered, and that was an organization that worked really closely with artists. So when I went on to my next position, it was director and chief curator of the Museum of Craft and Folk Art. And that's a really interesting story because the director had poured her heart and soul into moving the museum to a new location in downtown San Francisco. It was beautiful. And she was really burnt out. And she was looking for someone to come in. And the board was thinking about closing the museum. And so people told me, don't take that opportunity. That's a terrible opportunity and don't take it. And I realized in that moment that I am not averse to risk. And I thought, how else am I going to get a chance to lead an institution, a small institution, but an institution? And so I applied, got the job, spent 5 or 7 years there and gained a tremendous amount of experience, a lot of on-the-job experience, budgeting and things that you don't learn in school. So that was amazing. I moved back to Arizona and I really all along the way wanted to get my PhD. It's the terminal degree in art history. And so it just gives you a competitive edge in teaching and in your career. So I took my time doing that. And about midway through, when I was done with my coursework, a job opening came up at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, where I'm now director and chief curator. And I thought, I think I'm ready to get back in the work mode. And I pitched the idea of doing an exhibition based on my PhD research. And happily, I got hired. I was given the opportunity to install that exhibition. I fundraised for it. I did a catalog. It was all amazing. And it was really the first time that ASU had allowed a PhD student to use this kind of like practice of curating in their PhD. So, I'm a huge advocate for, again, thinking about what you want, what your skills are, what you can bring to it, and then, letting people know. And you'll never know where that's going to take you. Like I would always say, okay, everybody said yes, 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 and now I just have to do it. Ooh, that's a lot of work. Like, what did I sign myself up for? But all really amazing experience. So this is my last day at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art. I am transitioning to a new position back in San Francisco, and I'll be director and chief curator of the SFO Museum. So, kind of similar to what Jenna was saying, like you never really your passion might be like my passion is working with artists and contemporary art, but I am absolutely open to working in different spaces in this field. So with craft and folk art, I focused on artists. I focused on contemporary artists who were working in the realms of craft and folk art. And so I was able to actually kind of turn the focus of the museum to something that was really relevant with our audiences at that time. So it was really exciting. And so I'm kind of thinking something similar with the airport museum. Like I didn't imagine myself being in an airport museum, but they have a beautiful collection. They do these incredible public art installations working with the Arts Commission of the city. And so I'm really excited about what may come from that position. Stay tuned. I start next week, but I shared with you the website for SMOCA. My focus and my time there has been diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and equity. and it's represented in all of our exhibitions. I'm really proud of the work that I've had the opportunity to do there. I also shared Scottsdale Arts is our parent organization, and they host an internship program, which is a paid internship program. Because it's paid, it's very competitive, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. You should still apply and be open to working in different departments within Scottsdale Arts. There's a public art department. Right now, they're installing a huge outdoor festival, Canal Convergence. Be open to working in learning and innovation or education department. Even development has an internship, marketing. These are all really wonderful ways of supporting the arts in our organizations beyond curating, beyond education. We have an amazing marketing director who is super passionate about the museum and the museum space. Just looking at my questions here, I think I covered most everything. My leadership, I would say, my leadership style is that I'm really transparent in my communications. I like to bring the whole team into decision making, and so we, especially experiences that we all learned going through COVID, right, where the rule book was like completely changed. And I know from my experience that getting buy-in from all of the staff is really important when we're making big changes. So communication is super important, and listening is part of that communication. Like maybe you think communicating is how you speak, but it's also about listening, and listening to what people need that they don't have, listening to what they're looking for. When I've had a lot of success applying for grants and applying to foundations to support my exhibitions. And part of that success just comes from knowing what a foundation wants to support and understanding how you fulfill that need. So again, it's as much about articulating a vision and idea as it is understanding and listening what somebody is looking for. Goodness, obviously internships are important. I think we've all touched on that. I mentioned doing your best at every task you're given and not necessarily waiting for opportunities to come to you. I always tell my students in curating, if curating is what you really want to do, don't wait for a chance to curate in a museum. That's going to take years of training and experience to get to that level. Curate an exhibition in your garage and invite your neighbors, and go through all the processes of marketing and fundraising and just do it, and that will give you experience that you otherwise wouldn't have. And what else? Be creative, because if you're working in the arts, I feel like it's a creative field. You're going to have to be creative at how you approach your job. And I certainly had to support myself through multiple jobs. When I worked at New Langton Arts, I still had to wait tables because the salary in the arts is not the best, and it can be really hard, especially in entry-level positions. So, I love Jenna's advice of taking time for yourself and creating those boundaries, and making sure that, you can support yourself financially and emotionally in all these ways. So important for the longevity of it. I think that's it for me. One last thing, I teach at ASU, and I'm going to keep teaching at least this 1 year. So I teach a curatorial activism course in the spring, which is an online course, spring B session. And then I'm teaching an intro to global museums in the fall. If you haven't taken those courses, you may want to check them out. Or if I've had you as my student, good to see you. And then I don't know, are we going to open up for questions?
Yes. I know there are some in the chat. So let me go ahead and remove that. And so if you do have, I'll go to the questions in the chat, so you're welcome to post that there. But also if you want to just unmute and share, you're welcome to do that. I'll stop recording now, so hold on just a second.